Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me on today's webinar where we're going to cover off the enterprise features that exist in Insight. This is going to be part of, I guess, a brief series of webinars where we cover off the entirety of enterprise. Initially, we're going to touch on the case management features. And as such, I don't want to take up too much of your time today, so I'll get straight into it. So there's 7 areas that we're really keen on covering today. I'll go through each one individually. There's a few that I can demo how they work. There's a couple which I'll discuss through just because we can't necessarily demo them, but equally they're really valuable pieces that we do want to communicate. So just to start off with, so just covering off initially the things that we can't demonstrate, but I do want to talk over. The first piece being in relation to the home screen that we have here. So as per normal, how you would access Insight historically, you'd have your username and your password and you would log directly into Insight. As part of Enterprise, we do have multi-factor authentication, which will give you the ability to log in a slightly different way, but equally from a cybersecurity and an insurance perspective, probably a way that they would prefer. So ultimately, again, this is something that you can utilize. This is something you'll have now. This is something that you would need to speak to us directly. We would arrange to implement this with you because we do need to make some changes in the back end of the system. It isn't necessarily a switch that we just turn on, but if you want multi-factor authentication, you want to utilize it, you will utilize it, please get in touch with us and we'll definitely be able to put that in place. The second piece to touch on, again, so this is something that we can't necessarily demo now, but it's Insight's mobile app. So Insight historically, of course, you've had access to the system much like I have now through your laptop, your device within the office. But as part of Enterprise, we do have a mobile app whereby it doesn't necessarily have the full functionality of Insight, whereby you can't do any accounting on it. But from a case management perspective, you can view your matters, you can view ledgers, view files within that matter. But equally, its best use is probably for time recording on the go. The main intent behind it, you don't need to take your laptop everywhere. If you're on a train, you can use Insight on your phone and you can still do some of the fundamental things you'd need to do without the need for your laptop. This is very much of a switch that we can just turn on. Again, if you get in touch with us, let us know you want to utilize the mobile app and we can get that turned on for you. So just to get into the pieces that I'm now looking to demonstrate to yourselves today. The first one, a relatively simple piece. Equally, there is a little bit of an implementation with it. It's much similar to the multi-factor authentication, whereby if you get in touch with us, we can make the changes in the back end that are necessary in order to facilitate it. But it is in relation to the matter files on Insight. So historically, within your matter files, you've really had 2 options. You have the ability to convert to a PDF, and you have the ability to email the file directly from the matter files here. With the upgraded database file system, there's a few different features and benefits that you'll be able to achieve. Quite simply and quite honestly, the first piece, very basic, you'll just have the ability to click on rename and you'll have the ability to change a file's name through here without needing to go through the back end of the system. In order to achieve that, you can make that change, amend things and do that directly from the matter files as opposed to the back end. The second piece, again, quite simply, and it may send some alarm bells ringing, you have the ability to delete files directly from the matter files. Just to note, this is permission based and it won't just be a case of across the board everyone can do it. You'll be able to define people with the power to actually be able to delete things through the matters themselves. The last and probably most important piece of the matter files and the database file system generally is the ability to view file history. So for example, we have here the history of this file in general. You have the ability to view historically when things are changed, when they were created, the amendments that were made, i.e. we can see that I created this file yesterday and I quite simply just renamed it very recently. It just means from a compliance perspective, you have a full audit trail of everything that's happened within the matter files themselves. The next piece to cover off, and admittedly, this is something that people have used historically, and it wasn't necessarily an enterprise feature, but it's something that much more lends itself to enterprise than it did standard Insight. And I do want to delve into it a little bit further, and that is the legal form integration we have with Form Evo. The reason I want to go into this a bit further is because historically, we have really just shown how you can produce the forms, but not necessarily the back end of actually how you map it and how you can make them functional for yourselves. So historically, as you would have seen, you can go into the matter files, you select the form that you want through here, you click on the web page, that will produce the document. You can click open and that will produce that form. It will take you to Formivo and it will pull over all of the things within this matter that you've asked for it to pull over. What I want to show you is how you'd actually do the mapping in the back end to achieve this function. So if I close this off here, I go into form definitions and I'll show you where that is. You go into system and you go into forms. This will present to you the library of forms that you have within the system. Equally, if you want to look for a form, if we go into form definitions, add, and you can search for a form through here. It has the complete library. Ultimately, you select the forms that you want to utilize through the system. But if we go down here and I want to have a look at my IHT form, so I find IHT 400, click on that form there. I'll give it a second to load up. It will load up the standard form through Formivo, and then you have the boxes here that are grayed out, and then you can select what you want to go into those particular areas. So for example, if I jump back to here and I want to have a look at last name, so what I'll do quickly, I'll just get rid of it so you can see that it's not there, but I want to, on every single form that I produce, I want it to pull in the surname. All I do, I click on this box here, it will present to me all of the fields that exist on Insight, be it user-defined fields or generic client forms, contact forms, whatever it might be. You then find that field. So if I click on client, quite simply, I look for last name, click on that, close it off, that will field there. I save that. And now every time I produce the form on this matter, that last name will pull itself in there for me. The next piece to cover off is it's another integration, but I feel there's a bit of value in showing it because it does make things a little bit slicker if you want to utilize it, and that is in relation to AML. So for example, there's a couple of options and a couple of ways to get there. So you have client and you have ID AML. This is where both areas exist and where you can utilize them. So if I go into client maintenance just here, I search for a client individually, I find Christopher Ward in this instance. When I'm on this client, go to client maintenance, all of the details are here, and now I want to perform a ID AML check. I go to perform check, I select the service I want to achieve, ID, AML/credit, go through person, it will pull in the details for me. I import the address that I have on the system, the communication methods, I go to ID, and then I just note what I want to search against. So if I say here, I want to go against the national insurance number, I select the national insurance number, type that in there, go next, and then I can submit that check. Once I press submit, those searches would exist through the matter here. So you can see I've done a number of them in the past. They will also exist on any single matter this client is associated with, and where they will show in the matter specifically, you have your matter files, and then you have Mr. Christopher Ward's files, where you can see a number of things through here, most notably, in this instance, the ID and AML checks that you have here. But how that works and how you can see that, you click on view and then it will just load up the pane. You can open up the PDF and you can see the result that was given by verify. So you can see quite obviously this one has failed based on the fact that it's not a real person. I'll close it off now and go out of here. The second way you can do it, because I can appreciate this will work if you have the client information, and the integration will work really well because the information is there and you can pull it in very simply. If you need to do ad hoc checks within cases, ID AML, you can click on that here and you can just quite simply press perform check, and you can do it against any individual or any data that you have here. You just type it in and it will work in exactly the same way. The last piece I want to touch on, and probably one of the largest pieces, and again, I appreciate we've gone over this a number of times before, but I want to sort of look at this from a slightly different angle, that historically, when we've noted about workflows and the facilities you have within the system, it's very much been a case of we've shown you what we already have, but not necessarily the back end of actually how you can achieve that and the other things that you can do with it. Because of course, as you'd have seen before, you can interact with these workflows, you do what you need to do. Any information you put in here will save itself within the user-defined data or any field that corresponds with this particular area. Once you've done tasks, you'll see the full audit trail, you can see when they were completed, you can see the history of them from a compliance perspective. But what I want to show you, because that's absolutely fine if the workflows are already there. but I appreciate the challenge for a lot of people is that the workflows aren't necessarily there, and you want to actually be able to build them yourself and be able to put some level of a process in place. And that's what I want to go over briefly today. One thing I will say on workflows, it's not as if you need a degree in coding to do them, but I appreciate there will be some level of trial and error as part of this. So what I would encourage, I'll show you how to do it now in sort of the basic level, but I would very much encourage having a play around, sort of working it out and just working out what you would want to achieve. Because like I say, what works for one firm may not necessarily work for another, and I appreciate you sort of have to find your path, albeit we can provide some level of guidance, and we are happy to do so on that front. But workflows themselves, they exist within the case management tab on Insight. You have your phases and you have your tasks, and I'll just quickly go through both. The one thing, again, I would say is just to sort of give you an example of how phases and how tasks interact. Within the workflow here, we have our tasks, and this is what we're currently in now. These are the individual actions that you would undertake, the title type or the property type in this example, but it may be collating some probate information or collating some divorce data, for example. It depends how you work and what you do as your day-to-day. Phases are slightly different. They are the individual milestones of any particular matter. So as we see here, again, just a converting matter, but it will work in the same way depending on what the work you undertake is. These are the milestones. This is where they house the individual tasks and the structure that the workflow follows. What I would say, workflows can be very in-depth. They can also be very light touch. It depends what you want. What I would probably encourage is probably to have something light touch, because up to now, you've lasted without workflows. Workflows, of course, yes, they'll be able to build a great level of efficiency, but we don't want to take away from the work you do day to day, and we want to take away the more menial tasks, but we don't want it to be a set ABC structure. Of course, they can work like that, but the way we see them working is very much, you have maybe a file opening and a file closing process which covers the compliance and the things that you need to do from a due diligence perspective, but it leaves the work down to the lawyer individually. And that's probably how a lot of people may want them to work. They take the menial, but they leave the things that you actually enjoy doing. So just to show you how that could potentially work. So again, case management, going into phases firstly. So we have here, so when we're in phase maintenance, we want to add an action, and this will give us the ability to create an initial phase. So for example, I may call this just A1 FO, and then I may call this file opening. And then from there, I can go a little bit further, and again, just put it in file opening, and then I can define where I want this to be. This could be upon matter creation, this is automatically there, or this could be that you manually select it as an active phase, and when you want to do it, you can. But I want this to exist across all of my matters, for example. So on every single matter, I now have a phase whereby I'm going to have a file opening process. So once that's then done, you just select you want this to be an active phase, save that, and then that will save itself against the system, and you can now utilize it. The next piece to cover off, and probably the more important piece when we look at it from this perspective, is the individual actions, because phases really are a housing for the tasks. So for example, we go here, we want to define firstly, in a similar vein, we want to define the code. So the code is what dictates the process or the stage in which the individual task will exist in a workflow and the structure that it follows. So for example, I may want to call this 1 FOAA. So this is going to be the one file opening, and I want it to be alphabetically the first thing that we do. So then I close this off, and then I say, just for example, file opening document. Do the same thing for the description. To define a day, this is 28 days from completion. You may have it as a particular set, so it may be a case of once a file's opened, you actually want this completed within 2 days of that. The next piece, you build the action do you want to be within it. So it may just be, like I say, producing a document, and that may be, if we go just down here, it may just, let's just say blank letter to clients, and this could just be FO document. From there, no need to touch into escalations, but we want this to exist in the phase that we just progressed. Again, one thing I would say, my database is extremely busy. Yours wouldn't be quite as busy as this, because of course, at the minute you wouldn't have any phase, but you drag the phase in that you want this to be housed within. And then from there, when you save that, then when you create a matter, that phase, that process would have started. Now, every time you open a matter, it will ask you to produce this file opening document that I put here. So this could be an example of how it works. The other aspect of phases, or sorry, tasks that I want to cover off is that a workflow structure may not actually really be what you want. It may be a case of you want just an individual task that will allow you to just, again, do something a bit more menial. And that may be a case, and I'll open up a new task here, that you want just a shortcut to sending an email, for example. So all we would do here, let's just say email shortcut, do the same thing for description, and then we may just call this 1 email, for example. How we would then make this a shortcut, because the due in days is now largely irrelevant because it's not going to be part of an actual workflow structure. What we might do now is we want this to be a repeatable task, but we want it to be ad hoc, and we want it to show on our ribbon. And what that means, and then we'll just put this through here, and then we just select the icon. Hopefully I have the email one here. If not, I'll just select letter 32, for example. But what that means, repeatable, ad hoc, and ribbon, when you're on a matter, that will mean it will create a task much like this. So rather than it being within the set structure here, you have ad hoc tasks at the top where you can click on them, and then they'll allow you to do that individual action. So again, rather than having to go into the depths of document production in this example, or go into the depths of the email integration, you can just click there and that task will be a shortcut to that point. Again, save that. Now that will exist for me across all of my matters. That is everything from a sort of a webinar perspective that I was looking to cover off today. I will keep the webinar open sort of for the next 5 minutes. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to address them and reply to them. But what I would say again, happy to have a discussion about some further training. So I appreciate this has been very high level. The workflows, it's been a bit of a whirlwind tour of that. Like I say, some trial and error will get you there, but again, happy to talk that through in a bit more detail. And if you would like to do that, please do reach out. But thank you very much for your time today and joining our webinar. The recording of this will be sent out. So if there's anything you want to cover off, by all means, please do have a rewatch of the webinar in the specific area. But like I say, thank you for joining today. I'll keep it open for questions. But again, have a wonderful day and thank you for joining.